Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank all the senators that have taken time to give their input and feedback on Division of Revenue 2023-2024. Mr. Speaker, like I said during the moving of the bill, this is perhaps one of the most important assignments that as a senator you get to undertake in this House, where you sit down, discuss with your colleagues, and agree on the vertical distribution of resources between both levels of governments, Mr. Speaker, between the national and the county governments. And I have listened to ideas from colleagues on how they intend to go about this exercise. Of course, we have listened, Mr. Speaker, to many of our colleagues lament about the need either to ensure that there is more prudent utilization of these resources. I couldn't agree with them any better. Mr. Speaker, that's given, and we shouldn't have a big fight about it. Mr. Speaker, second and most importantly as well, we have also agreed as Senate on the need to continuously defend and stand for the interest of county governments, Mr. Speaker. I know many people, and I have listened to especially our colleagues from the minority side, and it's unfortunate as I reply, most of them are not here. Mr. Speaker, keep on humming and remind us that, we need to send additional resources to the counties and so on and so forth. But Mr. Speaker, in my moving notes earlier, I pointed out to the challenges that you're experiencing economically, Mr. Speaker, and reminded our colleagues that many of the sins that you are paying for are sins of the past. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the economy is such that we live today under the shade of the trees that we planted in the yesteryears. Such is the guidance of the economy as well, that today we pay for the sins of the economic either prudent or improper management that the decisions that we make today. The real impact, Mr. Speaker, of the economic decisions that we make presently will be further years down the line. And it is so evident, Mr. Speaker, given the kind of a financial situation that we find ourselves in, as our colleagues find comfort in running on the streets and screaming themselves hoarse, saying that the economy needs to be managed better. Of course, we have equally reminded them that many of these challenges, whether it's debt or complete pilferage of resources, it was done under their watch in the previous, it was done under the watch of the previous administration, of which there were very strong supporters and defenders of, Mr. Speaker. We were in this House jointly with them, and on many afternoons, unlike us who are magnanimous on many occasions to allow them to debate, on many occasions you are being told, let the mover reply. If you have a problem, go and speak it elsewhere. And that is why we find ourselves in this situation, Mr. Speaker. But I want to appreciate the new administration that is in office, the interventions that are being made in agriculture, Mr. Speaker, interventions that are being made, Mr. Speaker, in even just ensuring that we are fiscally responsible, reducing on our fiscal deficit from 5.7 to 4.4% in the next financial year, the reforms that are taking place in Kenya Revenue Authority, Mr. Speaker. Of course, I know that many of the purveyors of graft in KRA are not happy. That's why they are beginning to hire people across in the media, in parliament, in different places, or trying to run fake stories, Mr. Speaker, and theories about why our revenue is not performing as per the expected levels. And I'm glad KRA issued a clarification, Mr. Speaker, and said, good ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking for people to blame, please do not include us. Because much as there is a lot that they could do better, Mr. Speaker, they are really trying in very difficult economic situations where, the supplementary budget, many of the state agencies are now beginning to spend, and the same can be seen in revenue targets. And I see KRA have issued a further alert saying that they are on course actually to raise in excess of 2 trillion, Mr. Speaker. Of course, a lot of it, as we all know, in excess of 1 trillion, Mr. Speaker, will go back to fund debt. And that will be an extremely difficult situation to find ourselves in, Mr. Speaker. But I know that eventually when they are done with putting in place a new administration, I know they are recruiting a new commissioner general and so many other things that are being done, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that as a revenue authority, they raise the necessary resources for us to share with our county governments. I appreciate also, Mr. Speaker, that many of the colleague senators that have spoken to this matter have insisted and implored on each other the need to ensure that there is better use of resource at the various levels of our county governments, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are two things that I want to say. Number one, I want to challenge colleague senators that perhaps after all is said and done, once we have passed division of revenue and perhaps even CARA, let us come and discuss also, because senators are akin to board chairpersons and governors are like CEOs running the institution. We oversight. We might not be involved in the day-to-day operations, but we see how the entities that we superintend are performing. How can we possibly sit as a Senate of the Republic of Kenya, Mr. Speaker, and be comfortable that of the monies that we devolve to our county governments, in excess of 70, and in some counties even 80%, are being consumed under recurrent expenditure, Mr. Speaker, leaving very little amounts to, Mr. Speaker, to do actual development, Mr. Speaker. Yet, we have passed PFM regulations, and we know what the statutory requirement is. But I can tell you for a fact, not a single county government, check in your counties, colleague senators, not one county government in this country is compliant with the provisions of PFM with regards to the division between recurrent and development. We need to sit down and pass a resolution as a house. We must demand of each governor to stop giving us excuses and file a recovery plan with this house so that you tell us, my recurrent is at 80%, but in the next 2 or 3 financial years, my finance and planning department has assured me that if we stop recruiting, if we put a freeze on increment, say, of salaries, if we reduced on certain expenditures that are not necessary at this particular time, we will be on course, Mr. Speaker. That's why, if you check through the current formula that we passed for division of resources, Mr. Speaker, there is 1% of these funds that is enjoyed, or if you look into the build-up of a formula, Mr. Speaker, let me put it better, because I want to take that again for members to understand. As a compilation of all the factors that inform what goes to a specific county, when you think about population, poverty index, health index, Mr. Speaker, there is 1% that goes to the specific counties that are properly managing their resources, Mr. Speaker. That 1%, because I think next financial year, Mr. Speaker, we begin again the conversation of the 4th generation formula for dividing or sharing resources among its counties, Mr. Speaker. We need to inbuild this particular matter, Mr. Speaker, so that we ensure that we expect and we demand of our county governments, Mr. Speaker, that they manage their resources better, so that we know my county is currently doing 70%. It's a shame, Mr. Speaker, that unfortunately, if we ask ourselves, even the senators that are in the House currently, many perhaps, and these are reports that are available, I have said this times without number. If you ask a good number of senators, what is the split in your county between recurrent and development? Unfortunately, very few know the numbers often. Yet, that informs the very direction that your county is taking. Because if your governor is spending 20, 25, or even 15% on development, then no matter how much noise you make, no matter how much you demand prudent use of the same resources, Mr. Speaker, if it is a small quota and a small allocation, unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, your constituents will never realize the proper fruits of devolution as is enshrined in our Constitution and as our people expected of us, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, it's unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, that we find ourselves in this situation. I hope, and I will be moving together with colleagues in leadership